The morning sun cast long shadows across the bridge of the orbital station New Seoul, as Admiral Tae-ho Kim reviewed the daily reports. 112 years of peace. That was how long humanity had been part of the Galactic Harmony Alliance, and Tae-ho never got tired of reading those words in the status updates. Through the massive viewing windows, he could see ships from 7 different worlds docked at the station. The crystalline vessels of the Valari sparkled like diamonds in the starlight. The flowing, organic curves of the Nethys ships looked more grown than built. The geometric precision of the Chitrak hive ships spoke to their insectoid nature. Each species brought something unique to the Alliance, and together they had created something beautiful. Captain Sora Park's voice crackled over the comm system. "Admiral, the Indomitable Spirit is ready for the joint patrol. All Alliance vessels report green status," Tae-ho smiled. Sora had been his finest student at the Academy, and now she commanded humanity's flagship. The Indomitable Spirit was a marvel of cooperative engineering. Human tactical systems worked alongside Valari shield technology, Nethys bioregenerative hulls, and Chitrak communication networks. It was more than a ship. It was a symbol of what different species could achieve together. "Excellent work, Captain Park. Begin Patrol Route 7. Keep our friends safe out there." Down in the sensor array, Commander Woo Jin Lee was having a much less peaceful morning. The long-range detection grid had been picking up strange readings for the past week. Energy signatures that didn't match any known technology. They appeared at the very edge of sensor range, then vanished before detailed scans could be completed. Lieutenant Hana Choi hurried over with a data pad in her hands. Her face was pale with worry. "Commander Lee, you need to see this. The unknown contacts are getting stronger." Woo Jin took the pad and studied the readings. The energy signatures were massive. Whatever was out there was big, very big, and there were a lot of them. "How many contacts are we tracking?" he asked. "At least 300, sir. Maybe more. They're staying just outside our sensor range, but they're definitely moving this way." Woo Jin felt a cold chill run down his spine. In over a century of peace, no one had seen fleet movements like this. The Alliance had dealt with pirates and smugglers, but nothing on this scale. "Get me Admiral Kim immediately, and start a full-spectrum analysis of those signatures. I want to know everything about these contacts." Meanwhile, on the garden world of Verdant Moon, Major Sang Ho-yoon was enjoying what he thought would be another quiet day. Verdant Moon was home to the Florian colonies, and the plant-like beings had created a paradise among the stars. Their cities grew from living trees, their technology worked in harmony with nature, and their people had never known war. Sang Ho commanded the small human garrison stationed there as part of the Alliance Defense Agreement. Most days, his biggest worry was making sure his soldiers didn't accidentally damage the delicate ecosystem. The Florians were gentle beings who saw beauty in everything and believed that all life was sacred. Major Yoon called Specialist Jin-A Park as she jogged up to him. "We're getting some strange reports from the outer system sensors. Commander Lee from New Seoul wants all garrison commanders to increase alert status." Sang Ho frowned. Alert status hadn't been raised in 15 years. "What kind of reports?" "Unknown fleet movements at the galaxy's edge. Could be nothing, but they want us ready just in case." Looking around at the peaceful Florian settlements, Sang Ho found it hard to imagine any threat reaching this far into Alliance space. But orders were orders. "Alert the team. Standard precautions. And Jin-A, keep this quiet. No need to worry our hosts over what's probably just sensor ghosts." Back on New Seoul, Dr. Hyun-Soo Nam was deep in analysis of the mysterious energy readings. As Earth's chief xenobiologist, he had studied every known species in the galaxy. These signatures were completely new. The power outputs were enormous, far beyond anything the Alliance had encountered. "Admiral Kim," he reported via secure channel. "These readings don't match any known technology. The energy patterns suggest weapon systems and propulsion that operate on principles we don't understand. Whoever they are, they're technologically advanced and heavily armed." Admiral Kim received the report in his ready room, where he had been studying star charts and defense protocols. 112 years of peace had made the Alliance strong, but perhaps too comfortable. Their ships were built for exploration and cooperation, not warfare. Their weapons were designed to disable pirates, not fight fleet actions. "Dr. Nam, I need your best assessment. Are we looking at a first contact situation or a potential threat?" "Based on the energy signatures and fleet composition, I'd say both, sir. First contact with a species that appears to be organized for large-scale military operations." That evening, Representatives from all 7 Alliance species gathered via hologram in the council chamber aboard New Sol. The Valari delegate, her crystalline form chiming softly as she moved, spoke first. These readings trouble us greatly. In our long history, such massive fleet movements have always meant war. The Nethys ambassador, speaking through a translator since her language was mostly sonar-based, agreed. Our deep ocean archives contain records of similar patterns. Ancient wars that consumed entire star systems. Commander Mi Young Kang, who had been monitoring communications from the Outer Rim, added her own concerns. We're getting reports from merchant vessels and scout ships. Some have gone missing in the sectors where these unknown contacts were detected. Admiral Kim looked around the virtual council chamber at the faces of his allies. These were good people from 7 different worlds who had chosen cooperation over conflict. They had built something precious together, and now it might be threatened. I'm calling for an emergency session of the full Galactic Council on Axiom Prime. All species need to be represented. If we're facing a new threat, we face it together. As the meeting ended and the holograms faded, Teho stood alone in the council chamber. Through the windows he could see the stars that had been peaceful for so long. Somewhere out there in the darkness, something was moving toward them, something that might not share their values of harmony and cooperation. He thought about Captain Sora on patrol, about Major Sang-Ho protecting the gentle Florians, about all the innocent beings across the Alliance worlds who had never known war. Whatever was coming, he would do everything in his power to protect them. The age of peace might be ending, but Admiral Teho Kim was determined that if darkness came to their corner of the galaxy, it would find the Alliance ready to stand together against it. They had built something beautiful among the stars, and they would not let it be destroyed without a fight. The enemy came like a plague across the stars. They called themselves the Devourer Hegemony, and their first message to the Galactic Harmony Alliance was simple: surrender or be consumed. There would be no negotiation, no compromise, no mercy. Admiral Teho Kim stood on the bridge of New Sol as the reports flooded in. The Outer Rim colonies were under attack. Massive enemy fleets had appeared simultaneously across 12 different systems, striking with coordinated precision that spoke of careful planning and ruthless efficiency. Captain Sora Park's voice came through the comm system, tight with stress. Admiral, we're receiving distress calls from Verdant Moon. Major Yoon reports enemy landing forces on the surface. The Florian settlements are under direct assault. Teho's blood ran cold. The Florians were peaceful plant beings who had never hurt anyone. Their entire culture was built around nurturing life and growth. The thought of them facing military attack was like imagining someone burning down a library full of children. Deploy the rapid response fleet immediately. Get Captain Park to Verdant Moon with everything we can spare. But even as he gave the orders, more reports came in. The Kitrak hive world of Nexus Prime was under siege. The aquatic Nethys colonies in the Cerulean system were being bombarded from orbit. The energy beings called Lumens were sending desperate pleas for help from their home dimension. Commander Wu Jin Lee coordinated the defense efforts from the tactical center. The sensor displays showed a nightmare of red enemy contacts spreading across Alliance space like drops of blood in water. For every Alliance ship, there seemed to be 10 enemy vessels. Sir, we're getting our first clear look at enemy ship designs, he reported. These aren't exploration vessels or even normal warships. They're built for one purpose: total destruction of enemy forces and civilian populations. On Verdant Moon, Major Sang-Ho Yoon crouched behind the twisted remains of what had once been a beautiful living treehouse. The Devourer forces had landed at dawn, and their first action had been to spray chemical weapons that killed every plant within kilometers. The screams of the dying Florian still echoed in his ears. Specialist Ginny Park crawled up beside him, her uniform torn and bloody. Major, they're not taking prisoners. Every Florian settlement they reach, they kill everyone. Even the seedlings. Sang-Ho had seen combat before, but this was different. This wasn't war. This was extermination. The enemy soldiers moved through the dead forest with mechanical precision, hunting down every living Florian and executing them on sight. There was no military purpose to it. They were killing for the sake of killing. How many survivors do we have? He asked. Maybe 300 Florians made it to the underground route networks. Our garrison is down to 42 soldiers. Sir, we can't hold them back much longer. Through his binoculars, Sang-Ho watched the enemy forces setting up some kind of massive drilling equipment. They weren't just content with killing the surface dwellers. They were going to dig down and poison the root networks where the last survivors were hiding. All units, this is Major Yoon. We're going to buy time for the evacuation ships. Make every shot count. In the Cerulean system, Commander Mi-young Kang witnessed horrors that would haunt her for the rest of her life. The Nethys were aquatic beings who lived in vast underwater cities. Their technology was based on bioengineering and harmony with ocean ecosystems. They had no concept of the kind of warfare the Devourer hegemony brought to their world. The enemy didn't bother with planetary invasion. They simply dropped massive bombs filled with toxic chemicals into the oceans. Mi-young watched from her ship's sensors as entire underwater cities died in minutes. Billions of innocent Nethys, including their young who had never seen the surface, choked to death in their own poisoned seas. Captain, her tactical officer, reported, "Enemy forces are moving to the next system. They're not even bothering to occupy these worlds. They're just killing everything and moving on." Dr. Hyun-Soo Nam worked frantically in his laboratory aboard New Seoul, analyzing captured enemy technology and biological samples. What he found made him sick to his stomach. The Devourer hegemony wasn't just another aggressive species. They were a collection of races united by a single philosophy. The strong had the right to completely destroy the weak. Their weapons weren't designed to disable or capture. Every piece of technology was built to cause maximum death and suffering. They had portable devices specifically designed to torture captured enemies. They carried biological weapons tailored to kill different species in the most painful ways possible. "Admiral Kim," he reported, "these aren't soldiers in any sense we understand. They're exterminators. Their entire culture is built around the idea that mercy is weakness and that inferior species should be wiped out completely." The first major fleet engagement took place in the Harmony sector, where Captain Sora Park led a combined alliance task force against a Devourer fleet. The battle was a disaster. The enemy ships were faster, more heavily armed, and operated with a brutality that caught the alliance forces completely off guard. Sora watched in horror as the enemy targeted medical ships and civilian transports first. When an alliance cruiser tried to surrender, the Devourer forces captured it and broadcast the torture and execution of its crew on all frequencies. They wanted the alliance to see what happened to those who opposed them. "All ships break off engagement," Sora ordered. "We can't save anyone if we're all dead. Fall back to defensive positions." But the retreat was almost as costly as the battle. Enemy forces pursued the fleeing alliance ships, picking off the damaged and slow vessels. They showed no mercy to escape pods or medical transports. Every alliance being they could reach was killed. Back on New Seoul, Admiral Tae-ho Kim received the casualty reports with a heavy heart. In just 3 days of fighting, the alliance had lost over 200 ships and millions of innocent civilians. The Outer Rim colonies were gone. The peaceful worlds that had taken centuries to build were now dead rocks floating in space. Commander Woo Jin Lee brought the worst news yet. "Sir, we've lost contact with the Lumen dimension. The last message we received indicated that the enemy had found a way to trap and torture energy beings. The Lumens are—" He paused, struggling with the words. "They're screaming, sir, across all energy spectrums." Tae-ho felt something break inside him. The Lumens were beings of pure thought and energy. They had never harmed anyone, never even understood the concept of violence. They had joined the Alliance to share their knowledge and learn about physical existence. Now they were being tortured by creatures who found joy in causing pain. "Get me a secure channel to Earth," he ordered. "Priority Alpha clearance. The Galactic Council needs to know what we're facing." As the reports continued to pour in, one thing became clear. This wasn't a war in any traditional sense. The Devourer hegemony wasn't interested in conquest or resources. They wanted complete extermination of every species they considered weak or inferior. And in their eyes, the entire Galactic Harmony Alliance was weak. The age of peace was over. The question now was whether any of the Alliance species would survive long enough to see another dawn. In the darkness of space, the enemy fleets continued their advance toward the core worlds, leaving nothing but death and silence in their wake. Admiral Tae-ho Kim looked out at the stars and wondered if the Alliance had the strength to stand against such absolute evil. The enemy had shown no mercy, no honor, no recognition of the value of innocent life. They were facing something that didn't just want to defeat them. They were facing something that wanted to erase them from existence entirely. The knife in the back came from those they trusted most. Admiral Tae-ho Kim stood in the war room aboard New Seoul, staring at intelligence reports that made his blood freeze. The Terran Collective, the rock-dwelling species who had been part of the Alliance for over 80 years, had been secretly negotiating with the Devourer hegemony. Commander Woo Jin Lee spread the intercepted communications across the holographic display. Sir, these transmissions date back 6 months before the first attacks. The Terrans have been feeding the enemy detailed information about our defenses, fleet positions, and colony locations. The betrayal was complete and calculated. While Alliance species died by the billions, the Terrans had been working with their murderers. They had provided star charts, military codes, and intelligence on the weaknesses of each Alliance species. The systematic nature of the Devourer attacks now made perfect sense. Captain Sora Park's voice came through the secure channel from the front lines. Admiral, we're seeing Terran ships in sectors they shouldn't be. They're claiming to be on patrol duties, but they're always near our most vulnerable positions. Dr. Hyun Sunam had been analyzing the pattern of attacks, and the truth was devastating. The enemy knew exactly where to hit us hardest. They bypassed our strongest defenses and struck at civilian populations first. They had inside knowledge of our command structure and response protocols. The revelation came at the worst possible time. The Alliance was preparing for what they hoped would be their last stand at the Battle of the Seven Suns. It was a massive star system with 7 inhabited worlds, each home to billions of Alliance citizens. If they could hold the line here, they might be able to regroup and mount a counterattack. Captain Jin Woo Bei commanded the Rising Phoenix, one of the newest ships in the human fleet. His crew had been working around the clock to prepare defensive positions around the 7 worlds. They had mined the asteroid fields, set up sensor networks, and coordinated with other Alliance forces to create overlapping fields of fire. All ships report ready for battle, Jin Woo announced to the fleet commanders. Intelligence indicates the enemy will arrive within 6 hours. This is where we make our stand. But Lieutenant Hana Choi, now serving as Jin Woo's intelligence officer, noticed something wrong with the fleet positioning data. Captain, I'm seeing inconsistencies in the Terran battle formations. Their ships are positioned to provide support, but the firing solutions don't match our defensive plan. Jin Woo pulled up the tactical display and felt his heart sink. The Terran ships were positioned perfectly to provide enemy forces with clear attack vectors on Alliance positions. If the enemy knew where to look, they could punch through the defensive line with minimal losses. Send a coded message to Admiral Kim immediately. Something's not right here, but it was too late. The Devourer fleets emerged from hyperspace exactly where the intelligence reports had predicted, but they didn't attack the prepared defensive positions. Instead, they moved directly toward the weak points in the Alliance formation. Weak points that should have been secret. Colonel Eunji Seo watched from her command post on the Third World as the battle unfolded in the worst possible way. Enemy forces bypassed the heavily defended stations and struck directly at civilian evacuation routes. They knew exactly where the refugees were gathering and which ships carried children and medical patients. They're targeting the hospital ships first, she reported over the comm. How could they know which vessels are carrying wounded? The answer came when Captain Jin Woo Bei detected Terran communication arrays broadcasting on enemy frequencies. The rock-dwelling allies were feeding real-time intelligence to the Devourer forces, telling them exactly where to strike for maximum casualties. All Alliance forces, this is Captain Bei, aboard Rising Phoenix. The Terrans are compromised. Repeat, Terran forces are actively assisting the enemy. Adjust your positions and treat them as hostile. But the warning came too late for many. The Florian refugee ships carrying the last survivors from Verdant Moon were intercepted by enemy forces who knew exactly which route they were taking. Major Sang Ho-yoon, who had fought so hard to save those gentle plant beings, watched helplessly as the evacuation convoy was destroyed. The Chitrak Hive ships, designed for coordination and mutual support, found their communication networks compromised. The Terrans had been given access to their private channels as part of Alliance cooperation protocols. Now the enemy used those same channels to spread false orders and confusion among the insectoid fleets. Commander Mi Young Kang, commanding a mixed squadron of human and Nethys vessels, saw her aquatic allies torn apart by focused enemy fire. The Devourer forces knew exactly which weapons would be most effective against Nethys biohulls, and they knew which ships carried the few surviving leaders of the aquatic civilization. They're not just fighting us, she realized. They're systematically eliminating the leadership and cultural centers of each species. This isn't random violence. This is planned genocide. The worst moment came when the lumens, the energy beings who had been trying to escape to their home dimension, found their retreat blocked by devourer forces equipped with specialized containment fields. The enemy had been given detailed information about lumen technology and biology. They trapped the energy beings and began torturing them using methods specifically designed to cause maximum pain to their unique physiology. Dr. Hyon Su. Nam received the scientific data on what was being done to the lumens and felt physically sick. They're not just killing them. They're studying their pain responses. The enemy is using Terran-provided information to develop new torture methods. Admiral Tae-ho Kim made the hardest decision of his military career. The Battle of the Seven Suns was lost before it began thanks to the betrayal. The Alliance fleets were walking into a trap that would destroy them completely. All Alliance forces, this is Admiral Kim, execute Protocol 7 immediately. Full retreat to emergency fallback positions. Do not attempt to hold current positions. Protocol 7 was the doomsday scenario they had hoped never to use. It meant abandoning the 7 worlds and their billions of inhabitants to save what remained of the Alliance military. It meant watching civilians die to preserve any chance of future resistance. As the retreat began, Captain Jin Wu Bei tried to provide cover for the fleeing refugee ships. His crew fought desperately to buy time for the civilians to escape, but the enemy seemed to know every move they would make. Terran intelligence had given the Devourer forces complete tactical awareness. Sir, we've got incoming missiles from 3 vectors. They're targeting our engines specifically, his tactical officer reported. They know exactly where to hit us to disable without destroying. They want to capture us alive. Jin Wu knew what capture meant. They had all heard the screaming broadcasts from tortured prisoners. All hands prepare for ramming speed. If we're going down, we're taking some of them with us. The Rising Phoenix's final moments were witnessed by thousands of Alliance personnel. The ship dove directly into an enemy dreadnought, detonating its reactor and taking the larger vessel with it. It was a small victory and an overwhelming defeat, but it showed that the Alliance wasn't finished fighting. Admiral Kim's final transmission from the battle zone reached every remaining Alliance world. The Terrans have betrayed us. They have sold the blood of our children for promises of mercy from monsters who know no mercy. Remember this day. Remember what they cost us. And remember that evil sometimes wears a friendly face. As the shattered remains of the Alliance fleets limped away from the Seven Suns, the scope of the betrayal became clear. The Terran Collective had not just provided intelligence. They had actively participated in planning the genocide of their allies. They had looked into the faces of friends and colleagues while plotting their deaths. The gentle Florians were now extinct, except for a handful of seedlings. The aquatic Nethys civilization was reduced to a few thousand survivors. The Chitrak hives were broken and scattered. The lumens faced torture that might continue for centuries, and Earth stood alone, the last free world in Alliance space, with enemy fleets already moving toward the Sol system. The Terrans had provided detailed information about human colonies, defenses, and military capabilities. The Devourer hegemony was confident that humanity, the weakest of the Alliance species, would fall easily. They had no idea what they had awakened. The death of Earth's friends would not go unanswered. The betrayal would not be forgiven, and the monsters who had tortured innocents were about to learn why peaceful species sometimes survived when warlike ones did not. The age of mercy was about to end. The message reached Earth 3 days after the massacre at Seven Suns. Prime Minister Young Sik-oh sat in the emergency session of the Global Defense Council, watching Admiral Kim's final transmission play for the 5th time. The words burned into every human heart like acid. Remember them. Remember what they did to our friends. Make them pay. Around the table sat the leaders of humanity, men and women who had spent their careers managing a peaceful civilization. They had overseen colonies, trade agreements, and scientific exchanges. They were diplomats and administrators. But as the full scope of the genocide became clear, something ancient stirred in their genes. General Seok Jin Han stood up slowly, his weathered face hard as granite. At 73, he was one of the few humans who remembered the old days when Earth still had armies instead of peacekeepers. Prime Minister, I request activation of the Prometheus protocols. The room fell silent. The Prometheus protocols were theoretical documents, war plans that had been drafted in humanity's early spacefaring days and then locked away when the Alliance brought peace. They were based on one simple assumption. What if humanity faced extinction and had to fight for survival using every tool their violent history had taught them? "General," the Prime Minister said quietly, "those protocols violate every treaty we've signed, every principle we've stood for since joining the Alliance." "The Alliance is dead," General Han replied. "Our friends are dead. The treaties are meaningless now. The only question is whether we want to join them or whether we want to make their killers pay for what they've done." Dr. Donghyun Lim, Earth's chief weapons researcher, opened a sealed file that hadn't been accessed in over a century. Inside were designs for weapons that humanity had agreed never to build. Kinetic bombardment systems that could crack continents, biological weapons that could sterilize entire worlds, psychological warfare tools that could drive enemy populations insane. "Sir, if we activate these protocols, we become something we swore we'd never be again. We become the species that nearly destroyed its own homeworld through warfare." Minister of Defense Yura Kim looked around the room at faces she had worked with for decades. These were good people, peaceful people who had spent their lives building a better future, but they were also human, and humans had not evolved to forgive the murder of their friends. "The question isn't whether we become monsters," she said. "The question is whether we become the right kind of monsters to stop the ones who killed innocent children." Captain Bo-Ra Shin received her new orders while docked at Luna Station. She had commanded exploration vessels for 15 years, ships designed to make friends and discover wonders. Now she stood in the construction bay looking at her new command, the Retribution. It was nothing like the graceful multi-species collaborative ships of the Alliance. The Retribution was pure human engineering from humanity's darkest military traditions. Every curve was designed for maximum weapon efficiency. Every system prioritized destruction over exploration. It looked exactly like what it was, a machine built for war. "Captain," her new tactical officer reported, "all weapon systems are online. We've got enough firepower to level a moon." Bo-Ra studied the weapon specifications and felt a chill. These weren't designed to disable or capture. They were designed to completely obliterate everything they touched. "How many ships like this are we building?" 700 in the first wave, ma'am. Production facilities on Mars and Europa are running at maximum capacity. Every civilian factory has been converted to military production. Across the solar system, humanity was transforming itself. The peaceful spacefaring civilization that had existed for over a century was being stripped away to reveal something much older and more dangerous underneath. In hidden facilities on Earth's moon, scientists were developing weapons that would have been considered war crimes a month earlier. Dr. Donghyun Lim worked 18-hour days designing systems that turned human creativity toward destruction. Nanomachine swarms that could eat through enemy ship hulls, computer viruses that could drive artificial intelligences insane, weapons that attacked the mind as well as the body. "These designs," his assistant said, looking over the specifications, "they're not just meant to win battles. They're meant to terrify the enemy." "Good," Dr. Lim replied without looking up from his work. "Terror is just another weapon, and we're going to need every weapon we can get." On Mars, the military academies that had been closed for decades were reopening. But these weren't the peacekeeping courses that human officers had studied for the past century. These were war colleges teaching strategies and tactics that came from humanity's bloodiest conflicts. Colonel Junho Kwan, a military historian who had spent his career studying ancient battles, now found himself training a new generation of human soldiers. "Forget everything you learned about honorable combat," he told his students. "Forget about minimizing casualties and preserving infrastructure. In total war, the only rule is survival." The students, most of them former peacekeepers, struggled with concepts their civilization had abandoned. Deception tactics, asymmetric warfare, psychological operations designed to break enemy morale. These were tools from humanity's violent past, refined with advanced technology. "Sir?" one cadet asked. "Isn't this exactly the kind of thinking that made our ancestors nearly destroy Earth?" "Yes," Colonel Kwan replied. "And it's also the thinking that let them survive when everything was trying to kill them. The enemy thinks we're weak because we chose peace. They're about to learn that choosing peace doesn't mean forgetting how to make war." As the weeks passed, reports reached Earth about the enemy's advance through former Alliance space. The Devourer hegemony was strip mining dead worlds, harvesting resources to fuel their war machine. They were converting captured Alliance technology into weapons for the final assault on humanity. The Terran Collective had provided detailed intelligence about Earth's defenses and military capabilities. The enemy knew exactly how many ships humanity possessed, what their technological capabilities were, and which worlds were most vulnerable to attack. What they didn't know was that humanity had been lying to everyone, including themselves, for over a century. Admiral Jae-hyuk Ryu, newly appointed commander of Earth's defense forces, stood before the assembled fleet commanders. Behind him, holographic displays showed the true extent of human military preparation. "The enemy believes we have 300 ships and minimal ground forces," he announced. "They believe our weapons are designed for peacekeeping, and our soldiers are trained for humanitarian missions. They believe we are the weakest species in the former alliance." The displays changed to show the reality: thousands of warships hidden in asteroid bases, weapons platforms disguised as mining stations, military installations that had been camouflaged as civilian facilities for decades. They are about to discover that humans are very good at pretending to be something we're not, and what we are, underneath all the peaceful civilization, is the species that conquered its own world through 10,000 years of warfare. Lieutenant Commander Yoo-jin No climbed into the cockpit of her new fighter. It was a radical departure from Alliance design philosophy. No life support redundancy, no defensive systems, no comfort features. Everything had been sacrificed for weapons, speed, and maneuverability. "This thing is a death trap," her wingman observed. "One hit and we're gone." "That's the idea," Yoo-jin replied, running through her pre-flight checklist. "We're not supposed to survive. We're supposed to take as many of them with us as possible before we die." It was a harsh philosophy, but it was fundamentally human. When faced with extinction, humans didn't just fight to preserve themselves. They fought to make their deaths as expensive as possible for their enemies. As the enemy fleets approached the outer edges of the Sol system, they expected to find a broken, demoralized species ready to surrender. Instead, they encountered something they had never seen before: a peaceful civilization that had deliberately transformed itself into a weapon. The first enemy scouts were destroyed by weapons that shouldn't have existed. The second wave encountered defenses that violated every assumption about human capabilities. By the time the main enemy fleet arrived, it was clear that intelligence about humanity had been completely wrong. General Seok-jin. Han watched the enemy formations from his command center deep beneath the surface of Earth. "They're slowing down," he observed. "They're confused. They expected easy prey and found apex predators instead." The transformation was complete. Humanity had shed its peaceful mask and revealed the warriors underneath. They had become something their friends had never seen, and their enemies had never imagined. A species that could choose peace for over a century, and then choose total war in a matter of weeks. The enemy had awakened Earth's wrath, and now they would learn why humans had once been the most feared predators on their own world. The battle for Sol began at dawn on Earth's eastern hemisphere, when the first wave of Devourer forces entered the outer system expecting to find helpless humans cowering behind outdated defenses. Instead, they found hell waiting for them in the dark between the worlds. Admiral Jae-hyuk Ryu watched from his command ship as the enemy fleet approached. Their formation was confident, almost casual. Intelligence from their Terran allies had told them this would be easy. They expected to face 300 lightly armed exploration vessels and a few orbital defense platforms. "Contact in 30 minutes, his tactical officer reported. "Enemy fleet composition matches our intelligence. Approximately 4,000 ships, heavy battle group configuration." Jae-hyuk smiled coldly. "Signal all hidden assets. It's time to show them what humans actually look like when we're not pretending to be peaceful." The first shock came from the asteroid belt. What the enemy had assumed were mining operations suddenly revealed themselves as massive weapons platforms. Hidden railgun batteries opened fire from concealed positions, sending kinetic projectiles at significant fractions of light speed toward the approaching fleet. Lieutenant Commander Yoo-jin No led the first wave of human fighters from their hiding place in the shadow of Jupiter. Her squadron had been waiting for weeks, powered down and invisible among the gas giants' moons. Now they erupted from concealment like wasps from a disturbed nest. "Remember your training," she broadcast to her pilots. "We're not trying to survive this. We're trying to make them afraid." The human fighters moved like nothing the enemy had encountered before. They ignored defensive fire, making attack runs that should have been suicide but somehow succeeded through sheer aggression and unpredictable tactics. When fighters were damaged, their pilots didn't retreat for repairs. They rammed their crippled craft into enemy ships. The Devourer forces had expected to face the careful, coordinated tactics they had seen from other Alliance species. Instead, they found themselves fighting opponents who seemed to welcome death as long as they could take enemies with them. Captain Bora, Shin brought her ship Retribution out of hiding behind Earth's moon with 600 other human warships. The enemy sensors had been tracking 300 vessels. Now they faced a fleet 7 times larger than they had prepared for, armed with weapons that shouldn't have existed. All ships, weapons free, she ordered. Remember the Florians. Remember the Chitrak. Remember the Lumens who are still being tortured. Make them pay for every innocent life they took. The human fleet attacked with a savagery that caught the enemy completely off guard. These weren't the careful, measured tactics of the Alliance. This was warfare as humanity had perfected it through millennia of conflict on Earth. Every maneuver was designed to maximize enemy casualties regardless of the cost to human forces. Dr. Dong Hyun, Lim's new weapons proved devastatingly effective. Nanomachine clouds ate through enemy ship hulls like acid through paper. Computer viruses turned enemy artificial intelligences against their own crews. Psychological warfare broadcasts drove enemy soldiers to panic and madness. Sir, an enemy communication was intercepted and translated. These humans fight like demons. They show no concern for their own survival. Request immediate reinforcements. But the reinforcements the enemy called for were busy dealing with problems throughout the solar system. Every asteroid, every moon, every space station had been converted into a weapons platform or a trap. Humanity had turned their entire star system into a killing ground. Commander Jun Ho Kwan led a boarding action against an enemy dreadnought that had been disabled by fighter attacks. His assault team moved through the alien corridors with techniques that came from centuries of human military evolution. They didn't fight like the Alliance forces the enemy had faced before. They fought like humans who had learned warfare in Earth's bloodiest conflicts. Stealth approach, he whispered into his comm. Remember, they consider our tactics dishonorable. That's because they work. The human boarding teams used every trick their species had developed. They moved through ventilation systems, used explosive charges to create confusion and attacked from directions the enemy hadn't thought to defend. When faced with superior numbers, they didn't retreat. They set traps and used the enemy's own ship systems against them. The psychological impact was devastating. The Devourer forces had built their entire philosophy around the idea that strength meant brutal frontal assault. They couldn't understand enemies who disappeared into shadows, struck from unexpected angles, and turned defensive positions into weapons. On the surface of Mars, Colonel Min Ho Jung watched as enemy landing forces discovered that human ground defenses were nothing like what they expected. The red planet's surface looked empty, except for a few civilian settlements. The reality was that every square kilometer had been prepared as a battlefield. Wait until they're fully committed, he ordered his troops. Let them think they're winning. The enemy forces advanced across what appeared to be open ground, heading for what their intelligence said were lightly defended human colonies. Instead, they found themselves in carefully prepared kill zones. The ground beneath their feet erupted with hidden weapons. The rocks around them revealed themselves to be camouflaged bunkers. The very dust of Mars had been weaponized. For the Florians, Jung whispered as he gave the order to open fire, for every innocent life they took. Back in space, the battle was turning into a rout. The enemy fleet, designed to face Alliance tactics, couldn't adapt to human methods fast enough. Every time they thought they understood the pattern, the humans changed their approach. Admiral Jae-hyuk Ryu received reports from across the solar system. Sir, enemy forces are requesting retreat authorization from their command structure. Casualties are far higher than they projected. Denied, Jae-hyuk replied. No one leaves this system alive. They wanted to exterminate humanity. Now they get to learn what happens when humanity decides to exterminate back. The human philosophy was simple and terrifying. This wasn't just about winning a battle. This was about sending a message to every enemy force in the galaxy. Touch Earth's friends and face consequences that would make entire civilizations think twice about future aggression. Lieutenant Yujin No, her fighter damaged but still flying, dove toward an enemy command ship. Her weapons were gone, her engines failing, but she still had one option left. All human forces, this is Phoenix 6. Remember us when you see the stars burn? Her ship impacted the enemy bridge at 3/4 the speed of light. The resulting explosion took out not just the command vessel but 4 nearby support ships. It was a tiny moment in a vast battle, but it exemplified everything the enemy was learning about human warfare. Even in death, humans found ways to keep killing. As the battle raged through its second day, something unprecedented happened. Other enemy fleets advancing toward what they thought were defenseless human colonies began to slow their approach. Reports from the Sol system were unlike anything in Devourer military history. The humans fight without regard for their own survival, one enemy commander reported. Their casualties are enormous, but they don't retreat. They don't surrender. They just keep killing until they die. General Seokjin Han coordinated the defense from his bunker beneath Earth's surface. Around him, displays showed battles raging throughout the solar system. Human losses were heavy, but enemy losses were catastrophic. More importantly, the psychological impact was spreading beyond Sol. Sir, we're intercepting communications from enemy forces throughout this galactic arm. Word is spreading about human capabilities. Some enemy fleets are requesting new intelligence assessments before proceeding with attacks. Han allowed himself a grim smile. Fear is our most effective weapon. Let them tell everyone what happens when you murder humanity's friends. As the third day of battle dawned, the remaining enemy forces in the Sol system were trapped and desperate. They had learned that humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to make their enemies regret ever starting the fight in the first place. The battle for Sol would become legend throughout the galaxy, but not for the reasons the enemy had expected. Instead of being remembered as the day humanity died, it would be remembered as the day the galaxy learned that some species were far more dangerous when they chose peace than when they were forced to choose war. The reckoning had begun, and the enemy was about to discover that they had awakened something that wouldn't stop until every friend's death was avenged and every innocent life was paid for in blood.